we are winning, obviously. The fact that we've got these major studios interested at the same time in coming here is indicative of the fact that something is going to happen here.
2 powerhouse film studios want to set up shop in southern Nevada. That's if the state provides certain perks. What they are, that's this week on Nevada Week.
Support for Nevada Week is provided by Senator William H. Hernstedt.
Welcome to Nevada Week. I'm Amber Renee Dixon, and the woman you just heard from was Tina Quigley, President and CEO of the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. At Caesars Forum is where the Regional Development Authority recently held its 44th annual Perspective. That's Southern Nevada's largest economic development event, and it's where the CEO of Sony Pictures explained his plans for Las Vegas.
For lack of a better term, it's a no-brainer because talent, directors, talent, all want to come here. Everybody I talk to, producers, talent, directors in Los Angeles, most of whom live in Los Angeles, say they'd much rather come to Las Vegas because they can go home on weekends instead of having to stay in the location where they would be for 3 or 4 months to do a TV or film show in Atlanta, for instance. The plan is to build about 31 acres, 10 stages, 10 sound stages, office space, woodworking shops, metalworking shops. It's about 65% of the size of our facility in Los Angeles. This will be the only other facility that Sony Pictures has to produce film and television.
But Sony Pictures now has competition. Just 2 days before Sony's CEO was set to speak at the Perspective event, Warner Bros. Discovery announced its plans to operate and fully occupy Nevada studios at UNLV's Harry Reid Research and Technology Park. Like Sony, Warner Bros. Says this is all contingent on Nevada's legislature approving a certain amount of film tax credits. So what's the state to do? For insight into that, we bring in April Corbin-Girnus, deputy editor of Nevada Current, and McKenna Ross, reporter for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Welcome, ladies, and help me understand, April, can the state have both of these film studios, or do they have to decide between one or the other?
Technically, they could do both. In the 2023 legislative session, there was a bill for a film tax credit program that involved 2 studios. At the time, Warner Brothers wasn't attached to the project. It was just UNLV and Berkshire Development. But there were 2 studios in that bill. That bill did not pass, which I think a lot of people are reading into being like, probably not both. It is looking more and more like it'll be either or. Right now we know that Sandra Hardigee is an assemblywoman and she is sponsoring a bill for Sony, and then there's a state senator, Roberta Lang, who introduced it last session. She's coming back and doing another bill for Warner Brothers. So right now it's looking like there'll be 2 paths and 2 different bills, one for each studio, but technically the legislature could do both of them, but it probably seems unlikely is the sort of rumblings, but they can do whatever they want. Yeah.
And McKenna, I'm guessing that's because of the amount of film tax credits that are being offered.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, 2 years ago in the first bill, it was as much as $190 million annually for those film tax credits. And this next go around, they're saying it could be about $95 million. So, you know, nearly half cut down. And, you know, with half, that seems to cut down the number of studios that could be possible. I imagine that both of those projects will need every dollar that they can get from the state, or at least want every dollar that they can get from the state. And so compromise might be a challenge.
Yeah, and one of the things to remember is that the current film tax credit program is $10 million a year. So that's a huge jump even to 95 or 100 is the number that's sort of being thrown around now, let alone the sort of 190 that was first pitched in this. So it's a massive leap, however you look at it.
A major expansion. So the legislature, when it convenes in 2025, is going to have these 2 plans. And we asked Sony's CEO why their plan with the Howard Hughes Corporation is better. Here he is on that, followed by the CEO of Howard Hughes.
And what would you tell lawmakers about why your plan is better than Warner Brothers?
Well, I don't know that it is better. It's just ready to go. And we want to invite other studios to come work in Las Vegas as well. The plan that we have doesn't preclude others from producing here. from what I've seen of the Warner Brothers plan, it would take all of the incentives for them, and no one else would be able to enjoy the incentives here in Nevada.
This is very unique, this bill, because it requires the construction and development of permanent facilities before you're able to access the credits. You don't get the credits just for production. You have to have local talent working on the site. You have to build permanent facilities, and we have a long-term commitment to make sure those permanent facilities are going to be used and that we will diversify the local economy here in a meaningful way.
We've been working on it for 3 years. It's shovel ready. It's ready to go. I don't know that that one is. We're just waiting for the legislature to approve the incentive program, and we're ready to start digging dirt in Summerlin.
McKenna, what stands out to you as the key differences between, should we say, two plans or two bills? Because, I mean, the legislature's not in session.
Right. I mean, I think either could kind of work because right now they're presented as different bill draft requests in the legislature. And that just means that, you know, there's an assembly version sponsored by Sandra Jauregui, and there's the Senate version sponsored by Roberta Lang. And so two plans,
and those
two
have
bills.
been submitted already.
Well, they've been submitted as bill draft requests. We can't see the full text of you know, what it'll be until we go into session in the winter.
Got it. Okay. So what are the key differences between these two plans?
Sure. Right now, you know, that money that went down from the previous proposal, that's a big difference. But between Sony's plan and between Warner Brothers plans, they're very similar, you know, about 30-something acres in the Southwest Vegas, just in Vegas area, just in different development spots. And both try to incorporate educational components and vocational components of some kind. That's a really big component of these proposals because these state legislators understand that they need to keep these film studios in Nevada, investing in Nevada, and actually staying. You know, film credits have a reputation around the country of not really being worth the investment that they seem to be in the beginning. And so I think these legislators are trying to propose alternatives that would show that the studios are investing in Southern Nevada for the long term.
April, how would you describe the response to that critique that film tax credits haven't been all that helpful to other states' economies, so why is Nevada different?
Yeah, Sony and Warner Brothers have both sort of suggested that what sets apart their proposals in Nevada is that it is tied to the direct building of a studio. So if you think of the film tax credit in places like Georgia and Atlanta, where we know that there's a lot of stuff filmed, that's usually sort of temporary sets or things that are done. So what both of these studios are proposing is an actual facility, an actual campus, which I think shows bigger buy-in and more permanent jobs, and kind of that's the argument there. And the Sony CEO, when he was asked that question at the Perspective event, said, hey, if it wasn't working in other states, they wouldn't do it. I think the pushback to that is that a lot of people think that the state, particularly Nevada, has no problem wasting money in that sense. So I think there is, whether or not you agree with that sentiment, it is debatable. But that's the sort of general idea, is that, hey, if it wasn't working, people wouldn't be clamoring to do this, but they are. So that's that's their argument in a nutshell.
And when you talk about actually building facilities, Tina Quigley, president and CEO of the LVGEA, echoed those same sentiments. And as you heard earlier, said Las Vegas is the winner in all of this. Let's hear the rest of that soundbite from her now.
We are winning, obviously. The fact that we've got these major studios interested at the same time in coming here is indicative of the fact that something is going to happen here, and it is going to help diversify our economy. And I don't know if you heard, but Tony mentioned that the average salary of these jobs is over $100,000. That is a big deal to a community like ours, where the average wage is about $50,000, $60,000.
So big deal for Southern Nevada. What about Northern Nevada? Because their lawmakers are going to have to approve this as well.
Yeah, there isn't any, as far as we know right now, any component of including Northern Nevada in this. When this question came up during the 2023 legislature, there was sort of a minor push to include. Jeremy Renner, who lives in Northern Nevada, came to the legislature and was like, hey, we should do something for Northern Nevada in this. And people sort of listened, but it was never incorporated into that proposal in any sort of meaningful way. And again, the whole thing didn't even pass. It hasn't really come up again this time around. And it's important to note that also when we were having those conversations in 2023, Roberta Lang made comments basically saying, this is a project and a proposal for Southern Nevada, and that is okay. Like the argument is the Nevada State Legislature did a lot for Northern Nevada through the Tesla deal and through TRIC, their sort of warehouse manufacturing thing up there. Billions of dollars spent in there in public subsidies and development, and that's been a boon for Northern Nevada. So she's saying this is our version of your Tesla plan. This is something that is for Southern Nevada. It makes regional sense that's in Southern Nevada. Reno is really far from LA, so that this is for Nevada, for Southern Nevada, and it should stay that way, I think is the vibe.
The 2023 proposal, how far did that get? It obviously didn't become law, and why was that?
The sponsors behind it said that it just came up too late. They really started discussing it in the late spring, and the legislature wraps up in June, and so I don't believe it even made it to a floor vote. No. So there was not really an opportunity to take it too much more, take it farther. But the advocates really pushed for it. As April said, there were actors up there trying to get the attention on it. So Northern Nevada lawmakers definitely heard the plan. Whether or not that they would have voted for it, though, is a totally different story.
Was that a tactic to introduce it kind of last minute, do you think?
I don't think so. I don't think we ever confirmed whether or not it was sort of planned. It was introduced, as McKenna said, within the last month of the legislative session. And if you don't recall that was also around the time when the legislators were still discussing the A's Stadium. So there was a lot going on in terms of legislative push and lobbying and stuff like that. So that it might have been two major projects that there was not enough bandwidth to hear both of them anyway. And I think behind the scenes there may have been, we got rumblings that originally the project was for Sony, and then UNLV and Berger came in knowing that they would probably bring in another studio. So that sort of tension that we're seeing now between the studios was probably there in 2023. We just weren't sort of as apparent with it. So I think there were a lot of factors involved there, but we'll see, yeah.
How are you aware of that tension?
It's obvious. There are rumblings. People talk about it, and obviously, when you talk about legislative stuff, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, and a lot of people who are willing to share their opinions about things, sort of off the record or on background and things, and they have opinions about it. But it's hard for people to speak publicly, especially right now in the process, because obviously it's August right now. The legislative session doesn't start until February. That's a long, long time for things to change and all of that. But
because McKenna, what has Sony's official kind of response to Warner Brothers jumping in been?
The Sony CEO last week at Perspective, he was kind of, he shrugged it off a little bit. He was kind of like, I don't know if there's really capacity for two studios, but we'll see. And he was very polite, didn't try to push back and say that the Warner Brothers plan was, worse in any way, just different was how he phrased it. But certainly, he believes that his project is the best one and would want all of the incentives that he could get.
Yeah, he used the term shovel ready how many times?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's how he distinguished his plan was we're ready to go, whereas I'm not so sure Warner Brothers is. Where do you see, how will legislators pick between these two then if they don't have that many differences?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd make a lot of money from state lawmakers. It's going to be a battle for sure. It's definitely going to be, as you just mentioned, Sony is ahead of the game in terms of that they already, both of these studios already have land because, Sony has Howard Hughes developer and they have that plot of land in Summerlin. They've already been approved by Clark County zoning for use of that land. So that's pretty far. That's why he's saying we're shovel ready. We are ready to go. The Warner Brothers is with UNLV. UNLV owns that plot of land over in the Southwest. So they already have that sort of space, which is obviously a big issue there. But it's going to come down to sort of legislative muscle, and these are big players in the legislative. Sony and Warner Brothers obviously are huge names, have a lot of money, a lot of background. They could fill they could fill Carson City with with celebrities, to pitch their projects, and they're going to spend a lot of money, I think, on this. But at the same time, Howard Hughes is a developer, obviously built Summerlin, very well known in Las Vegas, even if they're not actually based here anymore. They have a lot of might in there. UNLV is obviously a huge institution that people want to see succeed and want to do well. So there's going to be a lot of players in there, and how it shakes out, I don't know. We'll see.
You brought up the A's Stadium, and Sony's CEO did as well at that Perspective event. The differences in funding between how the A's stadium is getting funded versus these film tax credits.
They have emphasized that they won't get these film tax credits until there's a studio built. And so, they say it could be around $500 million, to build some sort of, stage sound space and all of the ancillary buildings that go along with it. So, but they won't get those tax credits until the development of the project is done. And I think maybe that was the argument he was making.
Yeah, I mean, that it's different from the A's stadium and that the A's get some funding up front, right?
And I think that's just a general response to try and separate it from that, because the A's the A's bill passed the legislature, but I think through the public perception, there's a lot of pushback on that. And the appetite towards giving public subsidies, whether or not they are raising a room tax rate for something or indirectly through a tax abatement program, I think those types of public subsidies are getting a big pushback from people. I think people in Nevada are feeling strained in their own families and in their wallets and economically, and they're wondering why the state is helping businesses that are profitable, and I think that's the pushback that he's trying to get. I don't know that the argument necessarily stands up, but that's certainly why he's trying to distance himself from that, because that has proven to be fairly unpopular in the public when you talk to them about it. And we've seen that more and more with Tesla and all of these big deals that we've done.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining Nevada Week. And we move now to artificial intelligence and its impact on elections. Last week, we talked with AI ethics consultant Reid Blackman about deep fakes, those digitally altered videos and images. We first met him last year at the Artificial Intelligence Conference AI4, and for part 2 of our discussion, we're talking about chatbots. That's the type of AI that Nevada's Secretary of State, Francisco Aguilar, says he's most concerned about. You'll hear from him first, followed by Blackman.
This is the first election where artificial intelligence will have a presence. I had the great opportunity to participate in a test with several of the chatbots. I was able to ask them questions related to Nevada elections, and it was really concerning. I'm not concerned, yes, I'm concerned about deepfakes and the information we actually see in real time, but we have an ability to respond to those situations and to deal with them. It's the information being given by the chatbots and AI that we don't know is being given. For example, we know that young people are more likely to adopt that technology than others. And if they're a first-time voter, they may ask, when do I need to register to vote? And the information the chatbot gave was 3 weeks in advance of the election, which is wrong. In Nevada, we have same-day voter registration, which means we just turned away a potential young voter from participating. That's a big issue because we don't know it's occurring, we don't know how often it's occurring, and the youth vote could be a strong determinator in who the president of the United States is because our margins are so slim. And if a certain number of people are using this as information, they're not going to participate.
Okay, so can you simply explain what a chatbot is and then your reaction to what he has experienced?
Yeah, sure. So a chatbot is just, most of our viewers probably have interacted with a chatbot in some way. They've been online and some little pop-up box says, can I help you? And it's not a person, it's a computer program. It's a piece of software. And you say, yeah, I want to return my item, or, how long is the refund policy? And you just interact with it. You talk to it like you would a person.
A lot of government institutions are utilizing
Sure,
these.
yeah, right. Now, there's 2 different ways, or there's, broadly speaking, 2 different ways of doing a chatbot. There's called the old school and the new school way. The new school way is using like a ChatGPT. So this is large language model. It's ChatGPT. There's another company called Anthropic that has Claude. Google has, did they still call it Bard? No, now they call it Gemini. So there's all these large language models. This is the most cutting edge large language model chatbot technology. That stuff, so that's in one bucket. One thing that's important about that bucket is that it's well known for generating what gets called hallucinations, or some people call confabulations. In short, it just outputs false information. So if it doesn't know the answer, it'll just make it up. Some people call it, it's a BS machine. So it's it doesn't just say, oh, here's the answer. It does so confidently in many cases. So that's large language models, and they can be used as chatbots, but the danger is that they can output false information. So-called old school chatbots, what I'm calling old school chatbots, they don't have that kind of flexibility. If you pre-program it with the questions and answers. And so it can't go off the rails because it's just on very specific rails. If you say, when is election day, if it's not programmed to say it's on this day, then it won't say it. If it says it's on this day, it'll say that day. So it's very clear cut. It can say this, it cannot say that. if you're using a large language model of that, that first bucket variety, and there's crucial information like when's election day, when do I have to register by, whatever it is, that's dangerous. That seems on the face of it quite dangerous because it can hallucinate, it can make up false information, and then you have people misguided, not through any fault of their own, and then they don't wind up voting, or they vote for people that they didn't want to vote for because they falsely believed what the beliefs of the person were, the policy positions were. If we're talking about an old school chatbot, that's fine. I don't see any reason why you would use a large language model for this kind of case. If it's just purely information about things like when's election day and where can I vote, things like that, there's no reason to use this large language model stuff.
Well, I think the idea is that young people, for example, are going to say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me when the election day is, or when can I register to vote? You're saying that's not that common.
Well, I don't think we have any reason to think that Google has been unseated, right? That if it were the case that young people were flocking to, say, a ChatGPT, not using Google search and using ChatGPT instead, we'd see a lot more headlines about it. Google would be very worked up about it, and they are worked up about search to some extent. But it's more it's a fear, it's a proactive thing, as opposed to what we're seeing right now is the youth flocking to large language model chatbots to do their search instead of, say, Google or Bing for whoever uses that. So I don't see it as a problem yet. It's a scale issue. Look, might there be some people, young or old, who go to ChatGPT to get information and it turns out to be false information? Yeah, I'd be surprised if that weren't the case. But what's the scale here? If we're talking about, a dozen people, no big deal. If we're talking about 100,000 people, big deal. So I don't think we have a sense of what the scale is of people using large language models to ferret out information of high importance, like how do I vote? But if we do see that, that's a real worry.
And similarly, you can get on Google and find false information.
Exactly, right. Plenty of people will Google stuff, and they'll find fake news websites, they'll find just bad advice, and they'll follow that, and that's a bad idea too.
Earlier I'm sorry.
No, so then just the question is the rate at which people are getting false information from a ChatGPT relevant to election cycle or election requirements? Is it so outpacing the false information that people get, say, from a standard Google search? And I haven't seen any research to indicate that there's a big delta there.
Earlier, you talked about watermarks as a potential regulation. How would that even come to be? Would that be federal legislation? I mean, would there be consequences if it was found? Who would regulate this in the first place?
Nobody really knows. So there's two things. One is who's going to regulate it, and the short answer is could be federal, probably unlikely, although they're trying to push for it, and there could be state legislatures that do it. So that's plausible that they could pass such a thing. But then there's a technical problem. Can we actually create these watermarks in a way that's reliable? Can we create watermarks that don't get hacked? And we don't have that yet. Researchers are working on this sort of thing. There's also debate: should we be watermarking fake content, or should we be watermarking the true content? So maybe what we do is, instead of trying to figure out what all the fake stuff is and watermarking that, maybe we have like a stamp of approval, a stamp of verification for things that come from, PBS Nevada or the New York Times or CNN or whatever it is. So let's try to watermark the stuff that we have verified the source of, as opposed to watermarking the stuff that we can't verify the source of. So there's also this sort of strategic debate about which way should we go. And that is in part a technical question.
Where would you start in regulating AI?
Oh man, where would I start in regulating AI? So the way that I like to think about it is there are some things that are illegal and some things that are unethical. And a lot of stuff is already illegal. So discriminating against people of color, for instance, is illegal. There's questions about how to take anti-discrimination law and apply it to cases in which AI may discriminate against people, as an example. But at least there's strong foundation for, here's the foundation of anti-discrimination law, here's how it should or does apply to AI now. Some of that stuff is, and then you have some things that are unethical but not illegal. And then you have some things that are unethical but we don't want to regulate against. I know this is sort of a long answer, but we have some things that are unethical that you don't want to regulate against. So for instance, it's unethical to cheat on your spouse, let's say, right? But we don't want it to be illegal. That would be too much government power to put people in jail or impose fines on people for cheating on their spouses, though it is unethical. So when I hear the question, something like, how do you want to regulate AI? The thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so what are the things that are already not illegal? Notice that fraud is illegal already, right? So if you're conducting fraud or discrimination by AI, that's likely going to be illegal as it is. So what are the things that are unethical with AI, that are not currently illegal, that should be legal?
Should be legal or illegal?
Sorry, should be, you're right, so it should be illegal. What are those things that should be illegal that are not already?
Okay.
And it can't just be that, well, this is unethical, so it should be illegal. That's not the case.
Right.
And so that's a really hard question to answer, and it's not clear. My general stance towards regulation probably has evolved since the last time we spoke a year ago, which is that I think we're jumping a little bit too quickly into most regulation. I'd like to see more, let's take the law that we have now and see how it applies, like anti-discrimination law. There's lots of speculation by various parties about what the capabilities of AI are, what people are going to do with it, and we don't have a ton of evidence about what are the actually bad things that are going down. We have fear, but not a lot of good evidence of here's all the bad stuff that's going on right now that's having really bad impacts. And in the presence of that fear and in the presence of that ignorance, that's a bad place to start creating wise regulations from.
Reid Blackman, maybe we'll have you back next year and see how much has changed.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining Nevada
Thanks for
Week.
having me.
And thank you for watching. To see part 1 of that interview, go to vegaspbs.org/Nevada Week. That's also where you'll find the Gwynn Center's report on artificial intelligence and elections. For now, I'm Amber Renee Dixon, and I'll see you next week on Nevada Week.